All right, we're going to get started. I know it's 6:05 on a Wednesday, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you everyone for coming out. This is the first of our 2016 educational series at Makers Row, and we're starting off with Sourcing 101 with our Makers Row sourcing specialist, Liz Long. I wanted to do a few housekeeping items before we got started. If you have any questions throughout the course, you can tweet #AskTheSource, and we'll be looking at those questions and also implementing them towards the end. Also, on the sheet, if you're not already subscribed to Makers Row, there's a 1-month free promo code. Definitely take advantage of that. And lastly, Liz, who's our sourcing specialist, you can also book a one-on-one session with her if you'd like. It's makersrow.com/personal-sourcing. We'll also email that to you after the class. So a little bit about Liz. She started her own bag company when she was in her 20s and recruited a team, recruited a co-founder, and even inked deals with Tom's, Martha Stewart, Oprah, and was able to create an eco-friendly line of bags. Since then, she's been manufacturing for over 12 years, different types of products, and working with other entrepreneurs to make their ideas come to life. Ideas with products like from medical accessories to general handbags, other types of jewelry accessories, and even apparels and garments. So she's been working with a lot of Makers Row factories, has a lot of developed relationships with them, and is really focused on helping other entrepreneurs learn from her mistakes so that they don't have to make the mistakes the first time around. So if you have any questions specific to sourcing for your own garment, say, do you have lace in San Francisco? Those questions would be great for a one-on-one session, but if you have general questions about the sourcing process, for instance, if it was a specific question like, should my manufacturer be providing materials for me? Or who is making my sample? Or how do I negotiate X, Y, and Z? That would be a great question to present in this class so that it's helpful for the entire class. So with that, hand it off to Liz.
Hey everyone. So I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about this stuff, hence my career choice, but I particularly like talking about it with people who are earlier on in the process, which I'm guessing, I guess raise your hand if you're just getting started or have an idea or kind of, yeah, okay. So I enjoy it because I've been in your shoes, as Tanya mentioned, and I know how overwhelming it can be. And I deal with people every day at Makers Row who are just getting started, and I would say an overwhelming number of them are overwhelmed. So if I could wish for anything, it would be that you leave tonight feeling a little less of that and feeling oriented about this process, which is pretty foreign to most people. Even if they have great ideas, the process of actually making them happen can be not so great if you don't know what you're doing. So that's our goal for this evening. Before I begin, I just want to mention there's going to be a question and answer period at the end, as Tanya said. If there's anything that I'm saying that's unclear to you, like a word or just anything, and you really feel like you need some clarification before I move on, you're welcome to dive in. I might say, I'll answer that at the end, or we might tackle it now. So just FYI, it's informal, and I want you to feel comfortable. Okay? Okay. So we're going to start by creating a kind of mind map for you about what it means to manufacture something. And usually what it means is that you're working with other people, just on a basic level. So I want to describe to you the types of partners that you'll be working with, because I think it will help you understand how the flow goes. So partners, manufacturers, factories, vendors, suppliers, they have many different names. They fall into three main buckets, and those buckets correspond with your process of making something. So the first bucket are your design partners, your development partners, we might call them. And they're the people that actually help you execute your design. So you might come just with a sketch or an idea in your head, and they're the ones that say, okay, we can make a sample out of this, we can make patterns, we can make tech packs, all of these types of design activities. And I'm not going to get into all of them right now. But I just want you to understand that there are people out there that help you execute this, because most of us, unless we have a design background, can't do it ourselves. It's something we need to pay for and to hire help for. So design partners are number one. Number two are your materials vendors. And those are the people that make the zippers, the fabric, the wood, the plastic, all of the stuff that your products are made out of. And you also need to locate them on your journey of making a product. And finally, we have your production vendors. And so those are the factories that assemble your finished product. If it's a sewn good, we might call it a sewing contractor or cut and sew facility. If it's something else, we might just call it an assembly facility. So those are your three buckets: design, materials, and production. They don't always go in a linear fashion, such as I find this person first or I work with this person first. It's more like a circle. So when you're just getting started, you might reach out to a design partner and have them, talk to you about your idea and what it will cost to execute it. They might then help you locate a few material sources, and you might have to locate a few material sources on your own. You might be simultaneously speaking with a factory that has a great material source, or that factory has design in-house. So as you can see, these buckets kind of overlap. And most people will opt for one of two options when they're deciding which partners to work with and how to kind of set up their buckets. They will do a lot of it themselves. So they'll go out and look for every zipper, look for every buckle, look for every pattern maker, and they'll kind of get a big list together and find each individual person. Other people will opt for convenience, and they'll work with what we call an all-in-one solution. And so this is a factory that offers everything under one roof. They do your pattern development, they'll source a lot of your materials, and then they'll just slide you on over to the factory floor and actually make your product. And so what you gain in convenience, you sometimes lose in control with this type of factory. Not all of the time, but it's something that you should be aware of when you're deciding between these two avenues. If they are the direct connection to all of your material sources, you're getting the best price, are they marking things up? You kind of just lose a little bit of that first-hand connection, as you can imagine that you would when you have direct vendor relationships. But that's not to say it's a bad option. I think it's a fabulous option for when you're just getting started. I just want you to be kind of aware of the downfalls and also the benefits. Okay, so is everything clear? Any questions so far? Awesome. So I would suggest, as you're starting out with your product idea, and I'm going to use one as an example tonight. I was thinking on the way over, I'm going to do dog jackets, pet coats. See, I knew it was going to get a few laughs, and I don't think anyone will be making it, but if you are, this is your lucky day. So I'm going to use this as an example. If I was making pet jackets, I would set out and I need to find someone, say I just had this idea in my head, I need to find what's called a technical designer to help me execute it. They would maybe do some research on the competitors and make patterns and samples. They would make a tech pack, as I mentioned, which is the specifications of all of your product design, kind of a set of documents that you hand over to a factory so they can replicate your design. So that would be my first order of business. I might have to look for fabric for my dog coat, maybe a zipper and a snap and a brand label, so I would make a list of all those materials vendors, and I'd need someone to sew it up. So that would be my list, and I'd encourage you to do this for your own product before you get started. Okay, so now that you know who to look for, let's talk about how to find them. And this is where it gets fun. So Maker's Row is a fabulous resource, and it's because there are thousands and thousands of vendors within these very categories. And I'm not just saying that as someone who represents Maker's Row. If I had this resource when I first started, however many moons ago, I would be in a beach somewhere, because I just wouldn't have made so many costly and kind of mistakes, but also wasted so much time spinning my wheels and looking. So you have access to all these vendors on Maker's Row, but the search tips that I'm going to give you are applicable towards a variety of kind of sourcing platforms if you're looking online, wherever you're sourcing. So these are universally helpful. You first need to know the keyword of what you are trying to search. So sourcing works much like using Google. You need to know what you're looking for before you can find it. And so when people come to me, I have them think about their keywords of what they're searching for in two ways. And it's a little heady, but just go with me for a minute. So one way is the type of company that you're looking for, and another way is the noun of what you're looking for. So I'll give you an example of my dog jackets. If I'm looking for a factory to make these for me, I might look for sewing contractor. That would be my keyword. I might look for, cut and sew factory. So I might come at it from that angle. When I search so that's the type of company. But when I search the noun, I might put in pet accessories. I might put in jacket, because the kind of people that make jackets will most likely also hopefully help me make a dog jacket. I might think of something that's similar to this type of product, let's say like a vest. I don't know, that's not exact, but I think that a factory that could make a vest could make a similar item. So that's how I kind of want you to think about it when you're looking for those factories. And on Maker's Row, there's a search bar where you can enter in these keywords, and you'll return a variety of search results. But again, you would kind of do this anywhere that you were searching for your product. And I think it's really important to cast a wide net, which is why I spend so much time talking about all the different keywords that you want to use. Because you might put in sewing contractor and get a very short list. Well, you won't, that's a bad example, but you might be searching something and get kind of a short list of factories. And I think it's important as you're just getting started to have a really wide option as you're researching. And this can be helpful because you want to have a wide range of pricing. You want to be sourcing things from a wide geographic span so that you understand how pricing differs across geographies, that kind of thing. So again, making a kind of as long a list of keywords as you can do, and then put it into a search bar and starting to look. When you sit down, on Maker's Row specifically, you'll be going through a lot of supplier profiles, and some results may come up in your search that are relevant and some aren't. So if you're searching for, say, organic cotton for your dog coats, you might get a vendor that makes organic cotton t-shirts. So that's not relevant. So you need to be prepared to filter out. And this is something everyone has to do. I've been sourcing for a long time, and I still, have to filter out a lot of extra results. So as you're going through, you'll be filtering, but what you'll pay attention to is when you do find a factory that is a great fit, you'll pay attention to the way they describe themselves. And that will be another hint as to the keywords that you should be using. So maybe they talk about a particular type of machinery. And you're like, oh, that's what I need. I'm going to search for that in other places. Or maybe instead of jackets, they say outerwear. You're like, oh, yeah, I can search outerwear. And this may sound kind of like I'm nitpicking, but these keywords will really lead you to the suppliers that you need. And I often hear people that come to me and they're like, there's no one out there that makes what I'm looking for. And it's usually a question of how they're searching. So does that all sound good? Okay. The next question that a lot of people have is, that's great, but I don't know what keywords to use. How do I know? And this often comes up when we're talking about materials. You may have an idea in your head of the type of material you envision on your product, or you kind of know that people must make these things because they're out there in the world, but you don't know the type of factory. And there's a few ways that you can kind of solve that mystery. One, as I mentioned, is looking at other supplier profiles, their websites, how do they describe themselves. That's how the industry will often, those industry terms will be on multiple sites. Another way is to go out and do some research. So going to a big box store, let's say like Target, and walking around and looking at the label contents on products. How do they refer to this type of material? And then that's the technical term that you want to be searching. Does that make sense? And the benefit of working with a design partner, as I mentioned in the beginning, is they should often plug a lot of these question marks for you. If you go to them and say, I'm looking for this kind of thing, they will hopefully be experienced enough to help guide you. So that's another way, either by hiring someone or talking to someone in the industry that should be able to solve your problem. Okay? All right. So let's say you have found, let's say 2 to 3 suppliers for each category that you're trying to source. And this is, I usually recommend at least getting a few. You don't want 1, you also don't want 10. Try to narrow it down. When you message these factories, this is the next pain point I hear from a lot of people. They say, I found a lot of great places, but I just haven't heard back from any of them. Maybe they're not interested in working with me. And I think that happens for a few reasons. Sometimes factories are busy, but more often than not, the way that people have communicated with that factory might convey that they are newer to the process and don't really know what they're doing. And sometimes factories don't always have the patience for that, unfortunately. Or they might have just been unclear in what they're asking, and the factory says, oh, I'll answer that next week, and then never gets to it because it requires more of an answer. So I have a few best practices for when you're reaching out to these kind of factories. The first is that you should always include a visual reference of your product, something to ground it down in reality. This could be a sketch that you've done. It could be a photo of a sample. I think the absolute best thing to send, if possible, is a photo of a competitor's image, so you can just link to it. Because then they can really see, exactly what you're doing and not your kind of chicken scratch sketch. So always include a visual reference and link to it in every email. The second thing is be concise. A lot of times, say I'm running to a factory and I'm like, I really want to create these pet coats because my dog Max just is always cold and I really think a lot of people are going to buy it and I'm going to sell it to Petco, and they just go on and on about all their plans. And really at the end of the day, what a factory cares about is, are you going to order, what are you doing and are you going to order? So being clear and concise in your email and short, I'd say 2 paragraphs, limit yourself, is important. And this brings you to my next thing, which is always put the ball back in their court. So when you're writing to them, always ask them what they need from you in order to provide information. Usually they have a very specific set of questions, set of information that they need from people, and they will have that ready to go for you. So by doing that, you will, I think you'll immediately put yourselves on good terms with them, and you'll definitely be more likely to get a response back. So I'm going to give you an example of one of these types of emails. If I was reaching out to that same sewing contractor with my coats, I might say, hi, I'm Liz. I'm launching a line of dog jackets. You can see an example here, and I linked to a product. I'm interested in finding someone to help me make these. Is this something that falls within your capabilities? If so, what information do you need from me in order to provide pricing and minimums? Simple. Okay, and I think creating that email and getting that right up front is really important. So if you have a membership to Makers Row, you have support time built into that, or you can ask someone else that you know to review your communications before you send them out. I think it's a really good idea. And also, this is just a common sense tip, but creating a template for everything that you're searching for so that you're not reinventing the wheel every time you go out there and write a new email to a factory can also be really helpful and save you time. I really err on the side of contacting as many people as possible in the beginning, especially when you're newer, because you can get information from each factory. And so having that template can be handy. And I just want to, kind of an asterisk that I want to point out. You might get some closed doors. People might say, no, that's not something we do. Like, we definitely don't make pet jackets. And I might say, oh, okay, thank you. Like, do you know anyone who does? If it's not a direct competitor of theirs, maybe they'll be open to share. Or I might ask a factory that I'm speaking with, I'm really wondering what material would be best. And again, this isn't always their job to guide you, but kind of just following the breadcrumbs and trying to pick up information as you go, even when a door is closed, can be really helpful and a smart way to make sure your time isn't wasted. Okay? Any questions so far? Anything sound good? Okay, so messaging. So we went over our tips. I'm just going to check here. Okay. So once you have messaged, okay, so once you have messaged, you move on to the part of sourcing we call vetting. And vetting happens very early on in the process. It's not, just when you're negotiating with that partner or speaking with the referencing. Vetting really happens when you are just getting started in your first communications. And this is because you want to pay attention to how any factories relate to you and pay attention to their communication style, because most likely that is how they are going to be when you're doing business with them, right? That's kind of common sense. And this is something that people will, I would say they kind of ignore their own gut instinct about this. They'll say, oh, I'm sure the factory knows what they're doing. They're just rude because everyone's rude. And I don't think that's true. So here's what you should pay attention to during your communications. The first is responsiveness. So do they take forever to get back to you? And I would give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt on making that first connection, because when you're a brand new inquiry, factories aren't always just jumping on it. I don't know why, but they are. So give them a little leeway on that first inquiry. But once you have established a communication channel with them, do they take 5 days to get back to you every time? That's not something that I would be into. When you are actually in production, responsiveness is more important than any of you can imagine right now. If you have a client that needs a last-minute change and your customer relationship depends on that, you sitting there and waiting for the factory to get back to you is not only going to risk your client relationship, it's going to give you an ulcer, and it's just not worth it. So responsiveness. The second thing is clarity. So when they answer something for you, do you know what they're talking about? Are you scratching your head? If they're unclear in the way they relate to you now, there could be a lot of confusion down the road. And so I think they need to have proper communication skills. The next thing is, do they make you feel stupid? And this is a two-sided coin. So it's not a factory's job to educate you. That is why you are here tonight. And I talk to factories every day, and a lot of them are not too pleased that they're constantly having people inquire that aren't ready and don't know what they're talking about. So the factory has to spend half an hour of their day getting this person really talking to you about the same stuff I'm talking to you about tonight. You need to work with a technical designer, those kind of basic things. And so they just get a little annoyed. So it's not their job to educate you, but it is their job to be pleasant and to be respectful and to answer questions that are within bounds. So if you're constantly feeling dumb when you're asking them stuff, chances are down the road when it comes to editing a sample, you don't want to be shy. This is something I really struggled with, and it's embarrassing to even admit this because I don't know why. But in the very beginning, I would feel shy about asking for too many changes to a sample. I've really bothered them. This is like our 5th go round. I'm just going to leave it. It'll probably be better in production. It never is. And so, like feeling comfortable to talk to them is really important. And so, you can be a judge of that rapport and what that feels like. Okay. So paying attention to their communication, that's the first level of vetting. And again, that happens very early on in the process. The second level of vetting is more metrics-based. And so we have 3 main metrics that we're using when we evaluate suppliers. The first is price. The second is time. And the third is your minimum buy-in. And I'll give you an example. If say I've decided to use organic cotton for my dog coats, only the best, and I go out and I'm talking to several fabric suppliers. The things that I would be looking from them, I'd be looking for the price per yard of that piece of fabric, so that would be the apples to apples comparison. I'd be looking for the minimum yardage that I had to order, so that's the minimum buy-in. And I'd be looking for how long it took them to ship it to me, the lead time. So 5 days, 5 months, And you want to be comparing all those things side by side so that you really have a true understanding. If someone, say on the production side, is giving you a quote for 3,000 units that is just like this to die for price, but you don't have the money to produce 3,000 units, that's not really helpful, right? You want to pay the more expensive price in that way. And I don't think after doing this for a long time, price is the most important metric, actually. I think minimum orders are the most important metric. Because I think minimum orders really speak to where you are as a brand. Are you ready to produce 20 units? Are you ready to produce 200 or 2,000? And so that's what I'd pay attention to if I was just getting started. I also think minimum orders relate to the level of risk that you're willing to take. So let's say you have $10,000 and no other money to put into this. If you spend that entire $10,000 on your first production run, and it goes wrong, which I hope it doesn't, but that could happen, okay, what do you do now? And so going in at a lower minimum in that case, say, I'm just going to start out with, say, 100 units. I'm going to take it easy, and I'm going to save $3,000, $5,000 to do my next run or something to that effect. I think that is much wiser. And so people get really focused on like getting the best price. If I order 100 more, I'll get the best price. And I don't think that's worth it. So that's something to think about. So I want to talk to you for a minute about getting prices from production partners. So remember we've had the 3 buckets. It's going to be very straightforward, especially for all of you just starting out, to get a price from a technical designer or an industrial designer. Because you're essentially going to them and saying, hey, I want to turn this idea into something, what's it going to cost me? And they're used to doing that all the time. In the same vein, it's going to be really easy to get a price from material suppliers. They have a catalog of materials, and you look at them, you get the price. For production partners, think about it. They really need a finished design in order to give you a finished price, right? So if you don't have your finished product yet, you have a couple options. You can just start sourcing the development part and the materials and thinking about that. And then wait to contact them so you have a fully finished design. And by finished design, you should have a sample or a pattern or a tech pack, things like that. Or you can start talking to production partners in order to assess capability, which can be handy up front so that you at least have a short list when you're ready to go forward. And so here's kind of a trick that you could use to do that. It's very similar to the email I sent before. You could say to them, hi, my name's Liz, I'm making dog jackets, and here's an example to a very similar style. Is this something you could produce? If so, what would the minimum be? Would you like me to send you one? And you can order one and send it to them. So most production vendors using this should be able to give you, a confirmation of yes or no, this is something I can produce. Or they might even be able to give you what I call placeholder price, where they say, we think we could do it at this price. We'd have to see the finished design to confirm that, but, this is what we can do. So at least you have some handy information there. And I think that can be, great. What you don't want to do is contact someone with a production vendor with just nothing. Just saying I kind of want to make this thing, can you help me make it? Because you probably won't get a response back. Straightforward. Okay, so those metrics that we talked about, you should be getting proposals in writing. You should see everything in writing. And I tell people, I talk about organization in the next little bit, but if you want to just upload those all to a Google Drive or something where you have them all handy, you can sit down and look at them. And people should have given you a line item proposal. And you guys are professional, so you understand you want everything broken down. If they have just given you a lump sum, which I just saw this working with someone today on the design end, someone said, yeah, we can make a shirt for you. It's going to be $2,500. That's it. There's a lot that goes into development, and we could, I hope you guys have a class on this because we could talk about all the different steps in detail. And the reason I'm saying that is because you want all of those steps outlined in your proposal. If not, how do you know what you're getting? How do you know if there's extra work that needs to be done, that it's what it's going to cost? So again, you want everything broken down. You should ask people for that if they haven't given it to you. You should also have a time attached to each deliverable. So, we talked about lead time. If someone's making each sample for you, say approximately how long is that going to take? 2 weeks a sample, 1 week. Factories can be really notorious for bumping those samples back if they have other orders that they're busy with. So that's something you want to get in writing on the quote. When it comes to those production vendors, the third bucket, they should be able to give you a rough estimation of whatever they've quoted you at, how long it should take to produce that item. Okay, so that's important to see. Okay, the third level of verification is the one that people think of the most often, and that is checking references, that kind of thing. I think it can be, it's really helpful to talk to people's references because it just is, but people give you their best references, as we all do. So getting 2 or 3 is important, but I also think it's great to ask for their full client list if they're willing to give it to you. Because if you can see people's, if you can see that they're producing for other brands that you like, that look like they have great quality or have great websites, that's also a really nice indication. Okay, so that's one. Checking reviews is another way to verify. Makers Row has a great review system. You can also just Google online, this factory's name and review and see what other people have said. That's a wonderful way to do it. And finally, you can visit them. And so, visiting them is something a lot of people ask, should I invest the money to do that? I think yes, if you can. I definitely wouldn't choose it over actually making product. I don't think it's 100% necessary, but it can be really helpful not just in vetting, but in establishing a rich and rewarding relationship with that partner. So that when you're calling them for a favor or you're asking them for some advice that's kind of out of their scope of work, but you really want some extra info, they'll be more likely, they're humans, they'll be more likely to do it for you if you've met and you have that face-to-face interaction. Okay? All right, so those are our vetting strategies. And I also think asking anyone at Makers Row if they've had experience with a factory or getting that kind of feedback is, there's thousands on the site, but it can be helpful too if that's something you're looking for. Okay, I am just going to make sure, I want to say something else. I'm seeing it on my notes. Setting yourself up with a shipping account is one of these random pieces of advice that will really help you out. You can do that with UPS, with DHL, with FedEx. When you're in the development process, you are sending a lot of samples back and forth, so it can be handy to do that. But it's even better when you're sourcing materials. So you're reaching out and getting swatches. Let's say you're making a photo frame and getting different swatches. They'll often say, yeah, we'll send you a bunch of frames to look at, no problem, but you have to pay the freight. So when you're doing that intro template to the materials vendors, if you just let them know, I have a shipping number, or I'll give you my UPS number if you want to send samples. People love that, and they'll get right back to you. And they'll go out same day. It always works. So you should do that. Okay. And so one other thing I forgot: following up with factories when you have reached out to them. I have a little thing that I do in my head. I do the first intro, and I'll typically do that by email because, as I mentioned, I really like to include my visual reference, and I can't always do that otherwise. So I'll send them an email, and then I'll schedule a reminder to follow up 2 business days later by email if they haven't gotten back to me. Just bump it to the front of their inbox again. If I don't hear from them and I really want to work with them, I'll usually track down their phone number and give them a call and see what's up. Some people that are phone people prefer to get on the phone, they prefer to do it the opposite way, and I think that's great. I'm just an email person. So, but I give them usually about 3 responses, and I'll space it out over about a week to a week and a half. If I haven't heard back at that point, I just chalk it up to that they don't have great customer service, and I'm going to move on. Unless it's really someone that I just think is perfect, I might give them one more second. But I think that's like we talked about. You're vetting them at that stage. Okay. All right. So let's say you are starting to work with factories, and by that I mean you're starting to negotiate, you're starting to look at pricing, and then once you move on into production or sampling, as you're doing. There are also some best practices here for making your relationships stay the course. You'd be surprised how many people's relationships tend to fizzle out. One of them, either the factory or the brand, gets fed up with one another, or it's not a good fit, or for whatever reason it doesn't work out. So here are a few things you can do to avoid that. This is very obvious, but be respectful. I think people tend to think, oh, this factory is so excited for work, and I'm the customer and the client, and I have leverage and power in this relationship. And the good, that's true to a certain extent, but the good factories are busy, and they want good clients. If they're really packed, a lot of them have a production capacity, so they can only take a certain number of clients. They're interviewing you in just the same way you're interviewing them. So being really cordial is helpful. Okay, so the next thing is being organized. No one likes to be asked the same question 20 times. And when you're dealing with quoting, you might have quoted things at like 100 units and 500 units and 1,000 units, and stuff might have changed if you put a zipper on the dog coat or a snap or whatever it is. So there's a lot of numbers swirling around, and keeping those numbers organized right off the bat is important. So when I'm getting started with someone, one of the first things we'll do before we really even talk about what they're looking for is set up a series of Excel documents where we keep different pricing. We'll break down the product, talk about the different prices. We'll just keep data. Maker's Row has a notes function on the supplier profiles. You can keep information there that suppliers can't see, so that's another handy tool. However you want to do it, it's up to you, but just stay organized, don't lose things. And have some sort of system also for the follow-ups. And something I kind of didn't say about the follow-ups that I do want to add. When you're actually in production, so not just when you're following up with people that you're counting down for information, when you're in production, it can be a really good rule of thumb to set a reminder like once a week. I used to do it once a week and say, I just am checking in to see how everything's going. So it can be a good kind of rule of thumb getting into get the habit calendarizing that kind of stuff. Because just because you haven't heard from anyone doesn't necessarily mean everything's going well. They might say, yeah, we started with this other order, but we're totally going to get to yours next week. And you might have not known that for 3 weeks had you not checked in. So just being consistent about that is what I would say. Okay. There's a follow-ups. Okay, and this one, giving both positive and negative feedback. I think we often tend to have this perception that factories are like these tough people. They don't need a lot of warm and fuzzy stuff, and they want positive feedback just like everyone else. They are entrepreneurs just like you, and so they want to hear when they're doing a good job. And so it can be really, it can be easy to just constantly tell them something was wrong with this sample and something was wrong with this. And always trying to put a bit of positivity in there. It's like Fido's dog jacket just fits him really well. I'd like to improve the sewing in this one area, but we're really getting there with the fit. You don't have to be over the top, but it can really go a long way in greasing the wheels of your relationship. And I think when you get started working with these factories, you'll understand just how important that is and how beneficial it is for everyone. All right, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to do a little scan here. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about producing in the U.S. because I would say my most common question is how much is this going to cost, and I'm not sure where to produce. Do I produce in the U.S. or do I produce elsewhere in the world? Because there's a lot of options. And I have intimate knowledge with this. When I first started, as Tommy mentioned, we produced all over. We produced in China, we produced in India, in Central America, we've been all over. So I kind of have an insider's insight into the pros and cons, benefits and drawbacks. And so when people think of producing in the U.S., the first thing that comes to mind is pride, I think. It's great to support the U.S. economy, and consumers will really respond to this. And those things are true, but as a maker, the benefits can be much more tangible than that. And so, equal on par with that if that is a primary concern to you. One of the first benefits is ease of communication. So this is not just a language thing. It is a time, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm losing it. You know what I mean? Time zone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you are working in Asia, for instance, there's 12-hour time difference, and so you will constantly be having that delay. When we were producing there, I'd constantly have to set an alarm for the middle of the night, so I'd be up at 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock dealing with things. I couldn't do that now. I have a family. That wouldn't work for me. So it's something that you need to consider. And that is obviously something that you're not going to handle or deal with in the U.S. So that communication makes things go more quickly, but you also have speed that happens in terms of shipping. as you're doing your development work, you're going to go through maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 sampling rounds. And when those samples are coming from elsewhere in the world, you might have a week in between the time that they ship and by the time they get to you. DHL, I think, coming from overseas, like $70 for a small package. That can add up really quickly. So those kind of things, I've seen it add months on to the development process. And so that's something that you'd also want to consider. When you're shipping your finished product, I'd say the average shipping time from elsewhere in the world, overseas is maybe a month. In the U.S., quick. So that's something to think about. And then that product is all sitting on a boat, wherever it is, not sellable. So it's kind of dead money to you, and you put the money out to pay for it. So again, when you have a business and you're concerned with cash flow, it will be something that is very important to you. Okay, so saving time, lower minimums. And this is what I would kind of, as I was saying, the minimums are the most important metric in my mind. I also think it's the biggest benefit. Overseas minimums, in a lot of other countries that are big manufacturing industries, they deal with huge companies, their minimums are notoriously very high. And so that can be concerning for someone if they just don't have the money to buy in. But it's also a risk thing. So again, if you produce products and it doesn't work out, I'll give you an example. So when we were first making fabric, we were making it in China, and we made 4,500 yards of a printed fabric, and the printing came out totally wrong. Just totally wrong. 4,500 yards is a lot of fabric. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of bags, some of which are still sitting in a warehouse somewhere because they weren't possible to sell. So that's a lot of money to lose. And so going in at those lower minimums can just be a lot easier. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt this one train of thought, but
no, it's fine.
When you have a situation like that, is it always your fault or their fault, or how do you?
This was their fault. So that's a great segue. So no, it's perfect. When you're working in another country, it can be harder to take them to task. Are you going to show up at their door? Do you even speak the language to deal with anyone else there that can hound them down? Like, what is your recourse? In our case, we just didn't have any. So, we tried, but at the end of the day, if a factory doesn't want to give you your money back, they just don't. And customer service, quote unquote, is different all around the world. In the U.S., we're lucky that customer service, for the most part, we have business standards that are pretty decent, and so you'll benefit from that. And so in the U.S., it would be a completely different story. That would be like if it was really their fault and you could prove it, that would be a different story. But I very rarely hear such huge problems from U.S. manufacturers. So we'll talk about quality in a minute, but yeah, I would say that's not as common. So lower minimums, that's a huge benefit. And one of the great things about lower minimums is that you have less waste if things do go wrong. Now I think of it, I still do feel bad for all that fabric sitting there because it never was used. Okay, so quality control, let's talk about that. Quality control is something we can also have an entire night's discussion on. Quality control really goes back to your design work. When you're creating that design and you're creating all those specifications around your design, you're creating that perfect sample, those documents, that is really your living, breathing quality control manual. You might reformat it so that a factory can read it. There's plenty of quality control manuals you can look online for. But essentially, all of that work is done in the very beginning, so it's a full circle. So doing the design work and investing in it is important. I would say, give or take, development costs on an average product might range from like $1,500 to $5,000 per style or thing. Sometimes people are like, oh gosh, I had no idea it was that expensive. Other people, it's not that big of a deal. But if you are one of those people that's a little intimidated by the cost, I would say it's just totally worth it, because doing all of that work ensures that you have standards, that you've created your product in a positive, well thought out way. So when you're doing quality control here in the U.S., you want to use those design materials as the guide. You want to give them to a factory partner and have them follow that as a guide. A lot of people will also go to the factory and either go at the end of their production run or in the middle. They might go to check over everything right before they leave, and this is where I'm going to answer your question. So it's a really great thing if you don't pay 100% until you've actually seen the finished product. That's probably one of the most important things you could take away from tonight. If a factory tells you that you should, I think that's a big red flag. The question is, can you get there to see it? Can you hire someone to go see it? That kind of thing. If you can really strike a good deal, you would pay it and say you couldn't get to the factory, you pay the factory upon receipt. Now, New people won't always be able to get that kind of line of credit, but that would be the ideal situation. The problem being then you're relying on the goodwill of that factory, and if they care about their reputation. Again, you'd like to think that factories do it, and 95% do, but some are who they are. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take the pause and ask you guys for some questions. I've been talking a lot. Sorry.
What percent?
Oh, good question. So it ranges. I would say the two most standard percentages I see are 50-50, or 40-60, or 30-70. So anywhere between in that range.
NDAs.
Great question. So I'm not a lawyer. That's my disclosure. NDAs are great. You can absolutely ask factories to sign them for you. Most will. Almost all development partners will sign NDAs. So in that first bucket, the design partners. But some, I see your face, don't want to because they hear a lot of product ideas and they don't want to be held liable should two be similar, so they might have reasons. And then it's your decision to make. I tend to be a little bit looser on this kind of thing unless you have some life-saving product, which you may. But again, if I'm making dog jackets and I think they're really cool because they have some special thing, that might be something I might be a little bit more lenient with if I found a really great partner. There's kind of a way to get around this that I'll do with people, however, if you are feeling anxious. You can, we talked about using kind of like a sample of a competitor's product, linking to it, or sending them a sample. You can get pretty far along in the assessment process with vendors by using a dummy product, we call it, or something similar to yours if you don't want to enter into an agreement with them right away. So I'm trying to think of an example. I can't off the top of my head, but you can use kind of a placeholder product that functions very similar to yours, might have a similar construction. It gives everyone the idea of what you're trying to do without spilling the secrets on that special thing that makes your product your thing. Does that help?
And sometimes they're really close
People. It's not going to be the case typically if you're it's not as often the case if you're making something. So if they're telling you they're sewing something, chances are they're doing it here, but it doesn't hurt to ask because some people do outsource. It's more often the case when it comes to materials. So a lot of fabric committed to everything you need in the U.S. That's something we want to ask people because a lot of materials will be included. So that could be kind of in your little list of questions when you're going through deciding these questions.
Do you find that a lot of manufacturing places would prefer to use their vendors for materials, or are they generally open to bringing in your own materials?
No. Okay. So material sourcing, as you will soon find out, is long and laborious, and it's kind of hard. So people are more than happy to have you ship all your materials to the facility. Yeah. That's really not an issue.
I know some factories will actually require you to produce a sample with them first, as opposed to bringing your own before you proceed. Are there any points of negotiation you recommend making as far as even the sample production goes, like rounds of revisions, things like that are must?
Wait, okay, so say the second part of your question. I get the first part, the rounds of revision. So,
are there any things that you should make sure you're negotiating with them regarding the sample making itself?
Yeah,
in addition to just the production.
Okay, so I'll answer that in two parts. I would always have the factory that you're working with make a sample. So if they do require that, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, just because you want to see how they make it. I wouldn't put down money on an order until I've seen them make a sample. So I paid $100, $200, whatever dollars it is to get the sample made before I said, yeah, here's my 60% deposit or whatever it is. Even if you've seen other samples of their work, you want to see how they're making your specific item. In terms of rounds of revisions, they'll give you a cost for the one sample, and then everything should be very spelled out. Second, third samples are either billed at X number of dollars or an hourly rate. I wish I could give you a standard, rates really range. I've seen like $30 to $200, but that's a kind of ballpark that you could use for that kind of work.
If your product comes in different sizes, would you recommend to make samples in all the sizes?
In all the sizes. Okay, no and yes. If you're doing something with the product that's a unique fit, so it's not just like a shirt like you're wearing in different sizes, that they're all kind of the same. There's something unique about it. Yes, I'd sampled in every size. You just kind of can't be too safe. But otherwise, no, I would make it in a size that you could fit whoever your fit model is. You just might want to get all the sizes done. Yeah, when you're actually, but in that first kind of sampling phase when you're in development, yeah, no, okay.
When I'm pre-production.
Pre-production, yes, you want to see everything.
Okay.
Because you want to fit and test all the sizes to make sure everything's correct. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. Oh, sorry, I have a follow-up question to that. So if you sort of skip the design partner and materials partner phase, and you've already had your sample of product, and you go right to the production partner, and let's say you only have one example of the 3 sizes that you're gonna offer, does that production partner generally have like a technical designer or a technical seamstress on hand that can help you hash out the other sizes?
So it's called grading. They would just grade. Is it an apparel product?
Yes.
Yeah. They would help you grade the pattern. That's absolutely something we can help you do. Again, if you're really particular about the fit, that's where I might say, it depends. You want to be sure they got it right, I guess. But yeah, most do.
So, one thing that I've encountered when I'm going to meet with a new factory is every factory, you can bring them your patterns, and almost every time they're like, oh, we want to make our own pattern.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think you're going to encounter anywhere?
Kind of. I see a lot of them do. What else see people do is they'll digitize their patterns and kind of send them that file, and yeah.
Frustrating.
I know. I do see that a lot.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're not super expensive, but if you have it, depending on the garment, it can add up. So yeah.
And why do they want to do that? Do their own pattern?
Oh, I wish there's other reasons. I don't know, but they do. I'm assuming. I don't know. Can anyone answer that?
I think a lot of times it has to do with the machines, the specifications of the machinery that they're using, how it's calibrated and everything.
I think that sometimes just like they're not really open to doing anything that is out of their house, so to speak.
Yeah.
I find that sometimes because they have more control over the pattern, and sometimes you have an outside pattern you pattern
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Or it might be, even if you say it's true to fit.
Yeah.
They'll always give you the excuse maybe it's not the right size, not right. So that's why I
Yeah.
find a lot of people say that.
So now we that goes to the sampling process.
Yes. So sampling, the main cost would be your patterns, grading those patterns, resizing them, creating the actual samples, creating tech packs, markers, showing where to cut, all of that stuff is included. But everyone's, for people that are making non-apparel products, you're gonna have a different development process, which is why it's not something we're gonna totally cover tonight. But yes, it's the general gist of it. Sure, go ahead.
Is it normal that they charge a consultation fee?
Yes. Some do, some don't, and so
I'm sorry, her question.
So is it normal that they charge a consultation fee? And I would say, I don't know, 50-50. And that's something, I talked about reviewing all those proposals and having everything broken down. So what I'll often see is that if they've given you a lump sum, that consultation fee is kind of built in there, and you just want to know that it's there. I think it can be very fair. It's time consuming to go through the design process. There's a lot of conversing that happens. If you're getting started, there's a lot of educating and guidance that's happening on their part, helping you. So, that's pretty standard.
So I spoke with a manufacturer who had a minimum order of 500, but they told me, yeah, we're not ready to work with you. Go and sell 1,000 and then come back to us. And I said, well, how do I sell 1,000 if I can't make it? Was that just a creative way of them telling me no? Or
Yes.
okay.
I also think, that's why I said that minimums are the most important metric to me, because they really speak to whether you and the factory are a good fit. People with smaller minimums are used to usually working with people who are newer along this process, because most people start small. And so there tends to be just a good fit there in terms of what they're willing to do.
It was crazy because the minimum was 500, but he told me to go sell 1,000. I was like, well, I could just buy 500 from you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
My question is sort of related to that one. I was going to ask you sort of generally if you have any tips for negotiating minimums.
Negotiating minimums, good one. So, you can always ask if they'll go down flat out. So that's the obvious. The second thing would be, if you're willing to go in at a lower minimum and pay a slightly higher price, you don't necessarily want to offer up that price, let them come back to you. But sometimes, we talked about that minimum buy-in and how you don't want it to be, if your budget is limited, you want to have as low of a minimum buy-in as possible. So it might be advantageous to you to pay slightly more per piece, but have a lower minimum value. So I'd ask them that, if I'm willing to pay a higher price, will you lower the minimum and to what? And kind of trying to work with them there.
Would you say that that kind of situation where you're agreeing upfront to pay more would harm your go forward with that factory?
That's a great question. So when you're quoting, and this is a great thing. So when you're quoting, you should, I would always say quote in a few different quantity breaks. So say you had in your head you wanted to make 100. I'd go in and I'd ask them for the prices on 50, 100, 200, and maybe 500. Why not? Just so you know. And so if you have that agreed upon pricing up front, if they've already given you those pricing and you are paying more at that lower quantity, then that's been established and you know they're there. I wanted to say something else about the negotiating. Well, something else I've seen people do is charge like a setup fee. Because a lot of the times the reason they have minimums in the first place is it like costs money for them to turn the lights on and open the door. So if you're kind of covering that cost, I haven't seen this too often, but it does happen. So if you're willing to pay that fee, then they'll go forward at a lower quantity.
So would you advise if you're doing a panel to skip the whole technical designer thing if when you're going to a factory they're going to want to do their own pattern sample anyway?
Yes, and I wanted to say this in the beginning in terms of the buckets. I always start with the production bucket, almost always, because if I find a great factory that has all design capabilities in-house, I might work with them. I might still source my own materials, but I'll decide, based on what they're offering. So if you kind of start with that first bucket last and see what they offer and then fill in the rest as you need, I think that would be a great way to go. Tanya.
Hi, for those that walked in a little bit late, can you give us your top 3 takeaways from this event?
On the spot. Top 3 takeaways. Okay. Yes, I can tell you.
Top 3.
Yeah, so I don't want to repeat myself, but I'm going to hammer home the minimum thing again, really focus on that as you're reaching out. Casting a wide net and trying to look at your sourcing process with patience. So this isn't really like a really quick takeaway, but being patient and not giving up is something that I see a lot of people do. So, reaching out to as many people and thinking of those closed doors as a learning experience and trying to get some information. And then also not just comparing factories based on price or technical design partners, anyone, not just using price as the only metric, because people just tend to do that.
So I think I heard you mention that the design partner, the materials partner, and the production partner could be 3 different people or all the same person.
They could.
Okay.
Wait, they could be 12 different people or one person. However, if you're dealing with one person, they are usually subcontracting that work out. So it's not like they're doing everything under one roof, but they're facilitating those relationships for you. So you're having one point of contact, but there's a lot of other vendors behind the scenes. Tanya.
One question that I feel like comes up a lot too is just figuring out costs and like budget for production. Can you go over some of the basics around that, just very high level?
Yeah. So if you are deciding if you can do this or not, if you're saying, do I have the budget to do this? Here's what I would suggest. You can reach out to a few technical designers to get proposals pretty easily by describing your idea. They have either standard pricing they'll turn around to you, or they'll give you a proposal and they'll tell you what it would cost to do the development. So that's one quick way to get pricing. We talked about getting placeholder pricing from the factories. You could invest in buying a sample of what you're trying to make, sending it to the factory for pricing, knowing that it's not your exact product, but at least you have something to send them, and having them quote it out as if it was your exact product. Again, it's like a quick thing to do, but it will get you numbers and it will get you information. And then based on that, you can assess your cost. There's really no one cost I can say, because some factories will produce 10 of something, others, your material, there's so much that goes into cost. But those 2 activities might take you a week to do and you'd have an idea of, yes, this is something I can pursue or I'm going to hold off.
Hi, so to the technical designer, you just send your drawing to Sketches or to get a cost, or how do you do it? Because I understand the factory process, you said in the summer.
Yeah. So a technical designer, you could just go to them and say, I have this idea in my head, and just talk to them.
Something as basic stuff.
Yeah, it's helpful to have, like I said, you should include a visual reference, but hypothetically, you don't need actually anything completed. They're used to taking people through the process. That said, the more research that you can do in advance, the better. You know, if you use Pinterest, like making a Pinterest board or some sort of collage of what you want your product to look like, can be a great use of time, and you'll share that with them.
Where do you find a technical designer?
Yes, good. So, on Maker's Row, if you search in the search bar for technical designer, or industrial designer if you're making a different type of product, a bunch will turn up. Technical design, or the whole design process, is probably the most commonly requested. Like, people want to be close to that person if possible. They want to do it in their same city. You're lucky being here in New York because you really have your pick, but you can filter searches by state, so you could do that should you live elsewhere. So you can search for that. You can also search, you know how we talked about searching for the nouns? So the nouns around design might be like sample maker, pattern maker, those kind of things. They'll also come up. When you do that search, you'll see freelancers, which are a very common type of technical designer, but you'll also see the factories that offer that service, the all-in-one solutions. They will list that in their profile. And they would do that on their website, you know, again, wherever you're sourcing, it would show up there.
Is there like a typical cost for how much technical design services?
Yeah, I usually estimate 1,500 to 5,000. So I know that that's kind of you know, I hope it grounds it down into reality a little bit for you. That really depends. You know, if you're making something really, really simple with a cheap person, you'd be on the lower end. If you're making something a little more complicated with someone who's a bit more expensive, you know, the rates range would be on the higher end of that.
Is there like an hourly number though? For instance, if I wanted to call up and help you.
I've seen the hourly numbers. I'm amazed at how much they range. I've seen people do technical design for $30 an hour and $200 or $250 is probably one of the higher ones that I've seen. You know, if someone's like a creative genius for they to give you their ideas might be even more expensive. So it's kind of all over, but yeah, it's a range. Yeah.
As a technical designer, are they only responsible for creating the pattern and the template? Do they help with graphic design?
So all of them will be different, and that's, you know, one reason when you're showing them your product and what you need to do and you're getting that scope of work and having them list everything out, you want to make sure that all of the design that you need is included, or else you'll have to go elsewhere. Some will have graphic designers on staff. I'd say most often people get a separate graphic designer to do things like, you know, preparing the art file for the embroiderer or the label or whatever it is. But also, you know, we talked about the buckets overlapping. A lot of factories offer that service too, especially simple artwork preparation. So that might be something that you kind of fill in last in your big long list of things.
When first establishing a relationship with a factory, you're reaching out to them for the first time, first email, do you think there's like an added value to maybe mentioning something about like your background so that they, you know, kind of give you some sort of legitimacy before mentioning your new endeavor?
Yes, if you have a background in this field, I think that can be great. That can establish you. If you have any credibility builder is great. And I should have said that. If you do already have an order with someone, I was kind of treating that as someone who's completely new. If you've produced before and you've sold to someone, you know, a recognizable name, or any metrics, like we sold 5,000 units last year and we're hoping to do more this year. That kind of stuff will definitely bump you up in the we gotta get back to them list.
And I just want to be clear, the 1,500 to 5,000, that's per style.
Per style, yeah.
In terms of how you manage the timing, am I supposed to manage the timing, or is it okay that the supplier, the factory, ask them to write down the timing?
Yeah, you'd ask them to write down the timing, but you'd manage it in terms of those check-ins. So again, like scheduling a check-in every Wednesday morning just to go to all of your partners and say, how's everything coming along, to make sure you're moving along if something that's important to do. Any like basic project management.
How long would you take to make that on jacket, dog jacket?
I think to make my dog jacket, it would take me 6 months. Does that, wait, do you think that's long or short?
That includes production?
No.
So just to design and prototype
I think
and
so,
sample?
and find the fabric and find the perfect material. It might take me a little faster, but that's another reason you should work with us, because you can take 2 weeks. But if you're just getting started and you're really like, you know, going back and forth, yeah, that process can definitely be long. Matthew.
So just starting to develop a product, how many factories would you recommend you actually develop a product with? So just take a scenario, if I'm developing a jacket, it takes me 6 months to develop a jacket. If I don't like the sample, then that means that I have to wait another 6 months to get the next sample.
question of
Can you repeat
budget.
the question?
So he asked, what if I go down that long road and the factory that makes the sample, I don't like the sample. So I'm gonna say that nothing's wrong with your design, they just didn't make the sample properly. I'm gonna say that's your scenario. If you have the budget to sample with a few different factories, that can be a great exercise because, we talked about price not being the most important thing. If there's like a 50-cent difference, but this sample is so much better and you know you're gonna be able to sell it for more and people will buy it, totally worth paying. And how would you have known that had you not, sampled in both places? Again, it's your budget. If you are tight, then one place it will have to do.
So is there some type of like Walmart for material sourcing that like we should all know about? We should like look and go to. We want leathers or
There are, and they're kind of in different verticals. So and that's where the keywords come in really handy. So like if you put in leather, for instance, again, anywhere you're sourcing, you're gonna find a lot of wholesalers. Maybe I'll bring this up. For those of you that don't know, it's kind of basic info, but say you're searching for material like leather. You're gonna have the people that actually make the leather, and then you're gonna have wholesalers that are buying it from the makers and selling it in smaller quantities. And so for a lot of people who are getting started, they're starting in smaller quantities and they're working with those wholesalers. So say I'm looking for fabric for my dog jacket, I probably wouldn't be dealing with a textile mill who's requiring everyone to purchase like 2,000 yards of the fabric or 1,000 yards of the fabric they're making. I'd be dealing with a wholesaler. I'd want to get a few prints and colors, and so I'd be buying in lower quantities.
But how does one go about doing that exactly?
Finding the wholesalers? Yeah, so that would be your keywords. So when you're putting in those keywords, if I put in organic cotton, or I'd probably be a little bit more specific, but all of those types of supplier profiles, are you on Makers Row?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So if you put that in, I just didn't want to give you advice if you couldn't actually use it. So if you put that in, you should find profiles that come up.
So here's what happened, right? And I'm just gonna make up something like that. If I was looking for say stretch jersey, I don't even know if that's a real fabric, but I think it is. And I'm looking for a certain composition, right? So I'm looking for say 10% of rayon, and I'm going to make up sort of composition, and 20% of say viscose. And that's not necessarily evident or obvious from the wholesaler. Is that going to be evident only once you start reaching out to them, or?
That won't be evident.
That will not.
Take away the percentages.
Just say stretch.
Just use the noun. Yeah, no numbers in the noun. So and that's where sourcing is where I said, my takeaway is to be patient. That's where that labor comes in. A lot of phone calls. Do you have this? Can I see the swatches? Here's my shipping number. Okay, that's how that works.
I have a question about kind of like time calendar. High level, in your experience, is there a better or worse time to kind of start your, say, 6-month process with a factory as a small minimum kind of order that you're going to have a better advantage over people with larger orders, or is there?
There is, but
any better or worse time?
It gets busy like right at the end of the year, so you can leading up to the holidays. But I wouldn't let that stop you. A lot of the places too that are working on these smaller orders kind of churn them out. I wouldn't stress over that. It's not something I see being a huge issue for people.
Yeah, but it's really difficult to work with Chinese factories.
That's a question. Yeah, and I'm talking about U.S. factories. Yeah, she's totally right. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, one more.
In your experience, have you seen a huge discrepancy between the samples you're getting and once production is done? Like the difference in, have you seen much change in like sizing, particularly for apparel?
No.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. He's asking if there's a difference in the final sample as opposed to the actual production. And that's where, when I said like that design work you do, the sampling, that's really your quality control manual. You want to use that as, your standard. So if your production isn't at par with that sample, then you need to talk to the factory about how you can remedy that, because it should be exactly like your pre-production sample, and if it's not, that's on them.
On that note, as far as quality control with factories, is there something you'd recommend or a point you would recommend to visit and see the garment before it's packed and shipped? Is that a normal process?
Yeah, so you call it a pre-ship inspection, and there's people that do this for a living. But you can do it yourself. I think it's great to do it yourself in the beginning. You made goods that didn't meet your original sample, so you take your original sample with you, you take your tech bag, you be measuring and checking everything out. You would say to the factory, I'm not paying for this, it doesn't meet my sample here, you can see, and that's that.
Factories ever had an agreement with their vendors, their other clients, to not produce goods that are
non-compete?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't kind of get into that side of things. I'm sure they do, I don't see it come up, like when I'm sourcing for people, I don't see it come up a ton. I'm assuming maybe they have really big clients where it is a concern for them, but they can reach out to business. Okay, last one.
Alright. So for somebody that's looked on the site for manufacturing with lower minimums, is there some type of keyword search or filter process that you can suggest?
So many facts in my head, and I didn't get to say that one. That's perfect. So that's something when you're going through this process, you should be paying attention to, and that's where the minimums are a great way to tell. But like, do they work with smaller quantity buyers? Like, you don't want to waste your time contacting a factory that really focuses on high volume. On Maker's Row, there is a great, I think it's right on the left-hand side of the supplier profiles. Am I right? Where it says beginners. Yep. So you can kind of see who they cater to. If you're sourcing in some other way, looking on the website, if it's not clear, you can just ask them. But yeah, it's a really great way on the supplier profiles to see that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. Dropping knowledge I wish I knew when both Matthew and I had started the company a while ago. I wanted to give a few takeaways that I wrote down that I really got from the session that I personally went through, or I've heard other entrepreneurs go through, and some gems that Liz dropped that I wanted to make sure other people got, just in case, for the people that walked in late. One of the things that I thought was awesome that you went over was what to look for in a factory in terms of like a relationship. So responsiveness, clarity. A lot of factories will try to get away with just like being vague, or and then also, do they make you feel stupid? So are they going to treat you like a real partner? And then getting everything in writing, outlined, itemized, I think is really important. And I think it is something that we've made mistakes, even with factories that we had a relationship with. He would look at something and be like, okay, that's going to be $3 per item. And then he sends the invoice, and it's $5 per item. Didn't get it in writing. It's just his word against mine. Get everything in writing, even if you have a relationship with the factory. I think that's very important, that I really appreciate you bringing up. And then also, something that I hear from people is that I didn't hear back from the factory, and I asked them, well, like, did you follow up? Did you call? So following up, bumping up in their inbox, and then if they don't email back, give them a call. Pick up the phone, say, hey, I'm, so-and-so, I need a dog jacket. I emailed you already, last week at 6 a.m. Let me know if, when is the best time to have a follow-up. I thought that was awesome. And then one other thing that I thought was great was also being respectful. This is some feedback that we get from factories, actually, especially for people sourcing for the first time in America. They feel like they get a lot of inquiries from people that feel like it's more transactional, or more like they feel like people don't appreciate them with their relationship, and so they really appreciate it when people speak to them like they're people, like they're forming a relationship with them. So I think it's really, being respectful can go a really long way for the right type of factory that you want to work with. So really appreciated that. Thank you so much, Liz. We're going to be emailing out the syllabus, and then also some helpful blog posts, and we'll also email out Liz's direct email address in case you want to reach out to her and have any follow-up questions. And thank you so much for coming. We're having another event actually in Brooklyn in February. We'll also email you the link. It'll be a different topic, but it's the start of this monthly series. So thank you so much for coming. Email us any more questions, and have a good night.
Thank you so much.